Peter here, aka Peter Freak Out 10, bringing you guys another episode of the Movie Review Show with the good movies always reviewed. Okay, back into our movie review. Now, I know I promised you guys in the last video I would have a review of Cat in the Hat. I'm going to save that for another time this month. Definitely going to get to that soon. Still not sure how to feel about it, and I'll jump into this one. Here's how the order's going to go. It's going to be this film, Out for Justice tomorrow. I'm going to start the Christmas reviews tomorrow. And Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and a particular Christmas film that I really want to start reviewing in a particular series. I also might do a specific thing, something different for a good friend of mine. A few other stuff. Gonna get to that stuff later. But anyway, getting into the review. Today I'm going to talk about a film that is from a specific action star, and since I've been talking about Steven Seagal a lot, I figured why not start looking into his rival, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Heck yeah. Now, Van Damme, this is a guy who I never really knew about until my cousin introduced me to him around the time I was starting to get into Steven Seagal, because he sent me a list of films I should check out from the guy, and he said the first film that he ever did was his favorite. And I looked at a few of his other films before it. He was in No Retreat, No Surrender, and Breaking Monaco Fever, and Women Between Wolf and Dog. So I really didn't know what to expect, since this guy was in a few films that nobody knew about. And I was just willing. I was sort of worried about this film being boring and whatnot, since it kind of has that feeling of like Rocky with karate, but I was still willing to give it a shot. And what film is that, you may ask? That is the film that kicked Van Damme to superstardom. BloodSport. Now, BloodSport was a film made back in 1988, and this is directed by a guy named Newt Arnold. Now, for those who don't know Newt Arnold, this is a guy who's directed films like Hands of a Stranger, Bloodthirst, and this film. He's mostly an assistant director on films, because he did The Abyss, he also did The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Last Action Hero, Lockup with Sylvester Stallone, even The Godfather Part 2, and The Guardian, the William Friedkin film, which I reviewed. This was the last film he did as a main director before his death in 2000. But despite being an action film and a martial arts film for Van Damme, it also has kind of a biography feel to it, because the film itself is based off the real-life story of Frank Dux, who is the character that Van Damme plays in the film. And Frank Dux is a martial artist who went through the exact same thing that Van Damme's character went through. And I don't want to bother explaining what he went through, because the entire film is that story, and explaining what he is now, there would be no story to talk about. On top of that, this review, I'm not going to compare, like, if it's true or not to real life, because I really don't know much about him. So, and I don't want to waste time looking it up. So, really not going to compare it to the real life story. I'm going to look at it as a film and go on from there. But surprisingly, this film had a budget of $1.5 to $2.3 million, and this was around the time that Van Damme was starting to get bigger. He was originally going to do The Predator before Stan Winston came in. It was going to have more of an insect-like appearance, but some people say he was kicked off. Some people say he was fired. I don't really know which, but he left the project and went ahead and did this, and it made $65 million at the box office. So it had a huge return, even though it didn't make the top 10 in the box office. But it was still a hit, and it became one of Cannon Films' most profitable films of 1988. Critical reception, though, was extremely negative, because it has a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. On top of that, Van Damme was nominated for a Razzie for Worst New Star, but lost to Ronald McDonald in Mac and Me. That film deserved it, not this film, really. However, this film has gained a cult following. But I have one question to ask. And this is talking to John J.B. Wilson, the Razzies host. I gotta itch my nose. I feel it's worth it when asking this. Why would you give Van Damme a Razzie for this film? Was it really that deserving of a Razzie to give him? Really? Did he really deserve to be nominated? Did he even deserve to be mentioned in that same category? No! John Jerking Big O Wilson. That's what I'm going to call you, and for nominating him for this. And you know something? Matt, you were right. If the Razzies were a person, I'd punch him in the face. Matt, you were right. Again, it's his opinion, but a lot of films that I love, or a lot of people love, have received Razzies, and he doesn't seem to care whether it's someone's opinion or not. He treats it like it's a fact. And Matt said it best in his Lockup review. I'm getting sidetracked, but as I said, this was my first time viewing this film, and for a first exposure to Van Damme, I really love this film. And I have, as I said, I have my worries about it, because since it was based on the real life story of Frank Dux, I was really worried because I'm not a biography person, so I thought that maybe that would drag the film down, but it didn't. It really didn't. But, yeah. I thought it was a great start for him, but I'll get into why later. But, as I said, with the cast, you got Jean-Claude Van Damme. You also have Bolo Yeung from Enter the Dragon. We later go on to be in another Van Damme film, Double Impact. You have Leah Iris, who was in The Burning. She was the girlfriend. Again, I got itch my nose. She was the girlfriend of the camp counselor in it. You have Donald Gibb from Revenge of the Nerds. He was in the sequel, Revenge of the Nerds 2, Trouble in Paradise. He's in the sequel to this film, Bloodsport 2, which I haven't seen yet. Yeah, Forrest Whitaker, surprisingly, in a young role from Good Morning Vietnam, Species. He was also in Blown Away, which I haven't seen. I actually want to see that. But as I said, I really love this film. Definitely thought it was a great start for Van Damme. It's definitely a great way for me to get into him. And I'll definitely be picking up some of his films later, but anyway. The basic plot of the film is this. We meet this guy named Frank Dux, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, who in his youth was trained under the influence of ninjutsu by a martial artist named Senzo, played by Roy Sayo. And after a few guys with him snuck into his house and tried to steal the samurai sword that he had on the wall, Van Damme didn't want to do it and puts it back. And the fact that he even put it back basically earned his respect from Senzo, and he agreed to train him. And also, I gotta say, I love the fact that this kid who plays Van Damme as a child, I love the fact that he has his accent, and the part where Senzo comes in and tries to chop off his hat, like this part of the hat to intimidate him. I thought that was hilarious. But, yeah. So after that, we learned that Senzo's son was actually supposed to follow down the path that his father wanted him to do, but unfortunately he died. But they never explained to us. And one person said it. Matt himself actually said this when he was reviewing this film, that they never explained to us how he died. And I saw his review after I watched the film. That happens a lot with me, and I noticed the same thing. I'm like, they never explained to us how he died. Why isn't that there? But yeah, so pretty much after all that, he decides to take his place and train himself to take part in this tournament called kumite. And basically, years pass after getting all the training he needs, and in present time, we see he has grown up to become a U.S. Army captain and is currently in the military, but makes a leave without absence and makes his way to Hong Kong, and there we meet Ray, played by Donald Gibb, who is another member of the tournament, and we see the two develop a friendship, along with this reporter named Janice, played by Leah Aris, and who wants to get the story on what kumite is, and both her and Frank develop a relationship. However, as the fight gets closer, Frank realizes he's going to have to use all of what his master taught him, because he's going up against champion Chung Li, played by Bolo Yeong. Was it Bolo Yeong? Did I write? Was it Bolo? Yeah, Bolo Yeong. I'm getting confused, but yeah. But yeah, Bolo Yeong is the type of guy who gets so set off easily when Van Damme beats his record. And meanwhile, the army sends two CID officers named Helmer, played by Norman Burton, and Rollins, played by Forrest Whitaker, to find Frank and bring him back. But one thing those two don't know is that Frank ain't leaving till he's won. Hold on one second. So will Frank be able to beat Chun-Li and avoid the law? Or will he be walking back to the military base with a loser sign taped on his shirt? Yeah. Bloodsport, I really enjoy this film. Definitely really enjoyed it. And what I like about it is that it walks and talks like a biography film. This film has basically has this whole idea of based on the true story of Frank Dux, but it really doesn't feel the need to be like, we're gonna follow it step by step, we gotta make it this dramatic sort of opus character study that a lot of biographies I think feel the need to do. But this film I think did it perfectly, because I think the director Newt Arnold realized that that nobody came to see the character. I mean, granted, there are some character moments, but nobody came to see just the character developing. They came to see a fighting film, a martial arts film, and he did it perfectly. He did it perfectly. I think that getting Van Damme was the right decision. Sheldon Leach, who would work with Van Damme later on The Quest, that movie we'll talk about another time, but I really like that. I really like that angle they went with, and I think it works to the film's advantage, because it doesn't set out to be that whole thing. It's not Catch Me If You Can, it's not Raging Bull, and it's not Braveheart. It's a film that offers a lot more than I think it was advertised as. If you're expecting it to be Rocky, you're wrong. However, as I said, there are moments when Frank gets up, as Frank gets closer to the kumite, that you see that he needs to navigate these hills in order to get there. But the writing is so well done, and the character himself is really well done, that it never feels like a chore to watch, and you feel involved. You really feel involved because you know there's a fighting scene coming. And I think they realized that whole thing as well. That if we're gonna build to the fighting, we need to basically make the conversations and the character interesting. So, yeah. And I say that because I feel I never got into biography and action films. I never felt that it was necessary to have this whole biography angle with films. I think that that is the most boring thing ever. Granted, to each their own, anybody can say that, but I never got into that whole angle. And with the film, even though that there is that sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? There is that sort of hard edge to the karate scenes and whatnot, but there's still emotion in the fight. You still feel the emotion, just like Rocky. You still feel the emotion in this film, and I think it's done really well. So, yeah, and definitely the fight scenes are fantastic. We'll talk about them later. But moving on, the acting is top-notch in this film. Van Damme does a great job as Frank Dux. And as I said, I don't know much about him. I'm mixing my words about him from real life. However, Wikipedia doesn't seem to give much, so I don't think they want to know about him. So I'm just looking into the character from what I see in the film. But this being Van Damme's first leading role, I thought he did a great job. Because he gives the sense of a likability to Frank. Like at the beginning when you see him taking part in the robbery and he attempts to steal the sword and he backs out of it. Because let's face it, anybody who has the sword in their hand would have run away. I mean it. I could think of a lot of kids who would have just ran out of that house with that sword. Say, I did it. And become one of the cool kids. Anybody would have done that. But he didn't. He put it back. And you see him grow and become more and more determined to take part in the tournament. And you see him become an adult who's willing to prove himself. And it's in the sense that he wants to show his master that the training that they've been through has paid off. And it's not in the sense of, oh, I want to be the best, I want to be the god, I can go the distance. I mean, it's along the lines of, say, Rocky. And you get the idea that he looked to that guy as a father figure. And as the movie goes along, there's never a sense of unlikability to him. And you never get the sense that he's abusing the fame or power that he gets from the kumite. So, which I respect, because so many movies use that cliche, and seeing so many films do that cliche over and over and over again, it gets annoying. It really gets annoying. So, yeah, it was nice to see a film that actually made a character likable throughout the whole film and not let go of his goal that he wanted to accomplish in the first place. And even when something I won't spoil happens, he's still willing to take part in the tournament and fight. And with that said, Van Damme does a great job conveying those emotions. And I thought he gave the character a great amount of charisma. And he has some funny lines, too. I like the part where Ray and him first meet. They're playing an arcade game, and when he gets beaten, Ray asks, I wrote this down, by the way, aren't you a little young for full contact? And Van Damme replies, aren't you a little old for video games? I can relate to that. That line had me laughing. So Van Damme, I thought, did a great job as a reporter. Leah Iris, I thought she was okay. She was far from my favorite part in the film because to me she really didn't offer much. She was just there to be the love interest and say to him, "Yay, you could do it," and that sort of thing. And the chemistry was so paper thin at times. Like it just felt like they meet and they're like, "Yeah, we're in love," because then the two sleep together. And it just didn't have a lasting impact, their relationship. Usually, sorry about that, but usually I don't complain about stuff like that, but in this instance, it was so unmemorable that I just felt bored watching it. There's not much to say about her anymore, but Bolo Yeong, I thought, did a great job as the bad guy, because he's this huge tank of a man who will stop at nothing to win. And goes as far as to beat people in the most painful ways ever. And his appearance gives him a really intimidating presence. Like this sort of guy who's like taller than you and you're like looking up like, oh boy. That sort of guy. And he has very few things to say, much like Dolph and Rocky. Like, I mean, at times Dolph did speak, but it was more along the lines like, break him or something. That's sort of like this film. So yeah, I thought he did a great job, and it wasn't with the lines, like the fact that he wasn't talking as much. I thought it worked to the character. I really thought it worked. It didn't make him out like this cheesy bad guy who, after he breaks a guy's leg, he's gotta say, "Need a leg" or something like that. That would have been stupid. So I think they made the right decision to make him silent. But as I said, the film also involves a side story with Helmer and Rollins, played by Forrest Whitaker and Norman Burton, who I also think work well with the film. And the two actors themselves look like they're having fun in these roles, because the entire film you see them jumping through hoops to bring Frank back, and at one point this even leads to a chase around Hong Kong, which is really pulled out of left field. I will say this is definitely pulled out of left field. But as a whole, I thought it was a fun scene. And the two are such good actors, you could forgive a scene like that, especially towards the end when you watch the fight with Van Damme and they're cheering for him. And that scene makes them out as not really the bad guys that they were built up to be. And I thought it was a unique twist. But Donald Gibb, I thought, did a fantastic job. And to me personally, he's my favorite character. And what I like about him is that they don't set him up as the villain. I respect the fact that it's not really like, oh, he's going to portray him. I'm sick of seeing that. That's another thing that annoys me, that whole thing. Because the two had a great friendship. Their relationship, I think, worked out really well. Because from that scene where they're playing games and they don't set him up like he's the one and only. And the decision of him being a good guy, I thought, was the best decision I think they could do between the two. Because just that scene alone shows that these two have great chemistry. And the friendship set up between the two was really well done. Definitely really well done. And I love how charismatic, and let's be honest, he's a smart mouth. He's just as a smart mouth as Van Damme, but he's never annoying. And Van Damme and him share such great chemistry that those lines he shares with him don't bother me as much. But moving on from the acting, I feel the film revolves a lot around fighting. And for me, you get some of the most brutal fighting I've ever seen in an 80s film. The choreography here is fantastic. I think Newt Arnold himself did a great job shooting them. I love the soundtrack that accompanies it. Kumite! 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 Yeah. It looks so real. It looked so well done. It's bloody, some of the parts. There's some flinching parts, like the part where Bolo Yeung, or what's his name? I just forgot his name. Chong Li. Chong Li breaks a guy's knee. It's like, oh, that's gotta hurt. And some great practicality, practical hand-to-hand combat, which looks so friggin' real. I don't know why they can't do this anymore. I really don't know, but yeah. So yeah, I thought this was a great film. Definitely a great start to Van Damme. If there's only any complaint I could say is that the female reporter to me didn't fit, and at times felt like a waste of space. I also felt that whole scene with the chase could have been built up a little bit more, like have a little bit of a silly build-up that could have led into the fight, instead of the seriousness that surrounded it, because it just starts out of left field. And also they could have explained why the son died. That's something I feel they could have explained. But yeah. Bottom line is that even though it has its cons, Bloodsport is a fast, energetic punch that I think anybody will remember. And even with that black eye, you'll be grateful you received it. So either way, if you're looking to start a Van Damme series of reviews, highly recommend Bloodsport. I think this is a great film. Highly recommended. So overall, I give Bloodsport an 8 out of 10, and it deserves it. It gets my seal of approval. Definitely a great film. If you like martial art films and you really want to start watching Van Damme, or if you are tired of the Seagal films, if you just saw Above the Law, definitely get this. Definitely check it out. You won't regret it. Yeah. But that's my review for Bloodsport. And next time, going back to Steven Seagal, gonna take a look at Out for Justice. Heck yeah. About what I think of that film. So, yeah. I'll see you guys later. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Bloodsport. Did you guys like it? Did you guys hate it? Did you guys think it was a good start for Van Damme? Or do you think it could have been so much better? Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.